Welcome to GenderMeowster Podcast Network. Genderful is a talk show featuring non-binary and trans folks discussing various topics and special interests. We kindly remind our listeners that no person is a monolith of identities. All opinions are the speaker's own. This show airs live on Twitch at twitch.tv/GenderMeowster, and VODs with show notes can also be found on YouTube. Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope you're having an awesome day so far. I wanted to start this stream the same way I start all of these little gender streams and do my little HRT check-in. So I have fewer things to check in about than I did in the very beginning of starting HRT. Right now I am 1 day away from being 2 months on testosterone, and the most noticeable change that I have lately is I'm getting a lot of like peach fuzz growing in right here and like on my cheeks right here, which is really cool, which I really have been enjoying. The tickle in my throat seems to have gone away, so maybe my voice is dropping, but it's less dramatic feeling to my body. And, you know, I guess the other piece is there's been a lot of tired and sleeping a lot, but I also, a week and a half maybe now ago, had my second COVID shot. So that's probably been contributing to the sleepiness. But I think my brain has just been having to repattern and everything. So that takes some sleep to recover from. Yeah. So in just a moment, I'm going to switch over to our interview with the wonderful GumHaven. But welcome everyone. Thanks for coming into chat. It's great to see all of you. I see a lot of familiar usernames here. Instead of calling you all out individually, I'm just gonna start the show because I'm excited and I want to have as much time with Gum as possible. Hello, Gum.
Hello.
Hello. So everyone,
Hello.
welcome
Hi.
to Genderful with GenderMeowster. Our guest today is GumHaven, who uses she, her pronouns. GumHaven is a fellow streamer here on the Twitch platform. Gum, will you share with us how you self-identify or your little blurb that you do?
Oh God. Yeah, no, that canned line. Right? No, I self-identify. I am a professional artist. That part is true. I am a professional artist. I have a degree. I'm getting a second one. A trash gamer and an absolute degenerate. Hi, it's wonderful to meet you all.
I love it. I love it so much. So welcome here. There's one other thing that I'm wanting to say at the beginning of the shows, which is just a general note that no one person is a monolith of their identities. So just because we have a trans person speaking or an artist speaking, that doesn't mean all artists and all trans people feel the same. So I just want to say that at the beginning of every show, because part of the purpose of doing this talk show is so people can hear the diverse and broad perspectives of the different, many splendid gendered beings in the world. And yeah, so there you go. There's the thing.
Wonderful.
Well, welcome, Gum. It's so wonderful to have you here. So I first met you. You were doing a talk show like this with Marina Boo Ooh Woo.
Wonderful streamer as well.
Yes, I'll give her a shout out right now. And y'all had a lovely hour-long conversation, and I was just like, dang, I want more of that content. So that I like hung out and vibed in your chat probably more than Marina's chat, that whole thing.
Yeah,
and it's just been lovely catching each other's streams ever since.
Absolutely. It's been super, super fun. That was the first kind of thing like that I did. So when you approached me asking to do this, I was like, oh my gosh, absolutely. That sounds like so much fun.
So, will you tell us a little bit more about yourself? I know some things, but some of our viewers may not.
well, sure. Let me share with. I've already shared enough on Twitch. I might as well just fully expose everything about myself. No, I am I go by Gum on the internet. I am a professional artist. I graduated with a bachelor's degree about a year and a half back, and am in the process of applying for a master's. The big world changing event happened, and I was like, maybe I hold off for a little bit. So I started Twitch. With the help of some really cool, wonderful people, I was able to kind of put a stream together where I could do art and play games and just hang around with other like queer folks and like-minded people and just kind of create a little haven for people to hang out and vibe and just feel like they could be themselves. And that's always been my goal with streaming, is to kind of to speak to the important things where it's important to do so, and to also be able to just kind of like, vibe and have a really chill place to hang out without having to worry about anyone making you uncomfortable or worse. And I just, spaces like that on the internet can be hard to come by. So making another one of them was definitely important to me.
I definitely get the Haven vibe from your space when I've hung out in your streams. It's so nice. I've enjoyed interacting with your moderators, not in a like there's been a problem way, but just in general talking to folks. And yeah, I love that people can sort of vibe and lurk and watch you do art, or like say funny things and have a little bit of repartee and exchange with you. I've seen you do not only like really stunningly beautiful art streams, but also you do Jackbox and other video games as
Yeah.
well. And it's just been really cool to see the variety of things that you do.
Oh yeah. I mean, I have always loved doing, I mean, art. I started streaming because I was like, oh, like I'm doing art and I'm kind of like, either I'm at my partner's place or I'm at home and I'm just kind of like vibing on my own. And part of the reason that I loved being in school so much was I was around so many wonderful, cool, talented people. And I was like, oh, Twitch gives me the opportunity to be around like lovely, wonderful, talented people and just to have some company while doing stuff. And I mean, then it just became like a place to hang out, like play video games and do all kinds of things, and just, it became like a community, which was really lovely.
Yeah, totally. I love that. Well, it's really cool that you are working towards getting a master's. What may I ask what your can you be more specific about your other degree in art?
Oh yeah, it was a bachelor's of fine arts. The major was painting. I'm intending on going back, and I'm applying this fall or winter, should all go well, and also applying for a master's in fine arts in painting or new media, which is essentially just like a little bit more freeing, a little bit more digital oriented,
Mm-hmm.
because I have started to integrate a lot of digital content into my work.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I fully intend to, while I'm going for that degree, to stream a lot of the stuff I'm doing there too, because I think it's like uh just super wonderful to be able to share the content I'm doing, which more often than not is like queer focused art um with people. I think that's like so fun, so cool.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Um, cool. Yeah. My two degrees are in religion.
Oh,
Comparative
that's so
religion for
fun though.
undergrad, and then
Uh-huh.
I was going to get an MDiv, but then I like changed
Hmm.
religions partway through my master's, so I switched to a master's in theological studies because that's the only degree I could get out of there with only 2 years.
I mean, no, religion is super interesting, and I mean, as a queer person dealing with religion, it can be very complicated, but it can also be very freeing to kind of find your own place in it if that's something that you choose to participate in. You know.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah. I love it. Okay. Let's see. What questions do we have? So as a side note for the folks here in the chat, if you have any questions, you can type them in the stream chat and the moderators will filter them for us and plunk them in the lovely document that Gum and I are working off of for our conversation today. Can't promise you we'll get to it, but you can certainly try.
Yeah.
um, okay, so let's see. Is there anything else you want to share in sort of the tell us a little about yourself type question? Or do you
Oh
feel
gosh.
complete on that topic?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty solid. My life has been pretty bare in these past couple years. I know. I'm super into literature. As far as video games go, I'd say RPGs probably the go-to. I love Dungeons and Dragons. Been trying to get a game together forever, trying to DM a game forever, but that's a whole complicated thing. I'm sure you know better than a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people how difficult it is to get a game together sometimes.
I
Um,
do. We actually have one shots here every Wednesday. If you ever want to run
oh,
one, let
that's
me
so
know.
cool. That's so cool. Your stream is so cool. But yeah, no, I've been
Your
reading
stream is so cool. I love
I just
diving in both.
started Native Son by Richard Wright, which
Okay,
is a super, super solid book. If anyone's looking for book recommendations, that I'm very much enjoying myself with that one. I think that about covers it.
cool. So if you feel comfortable talking about it, I wonder how has your relationship to gender evolved over time? I mean, as
Yeah,
trans people, obviously, that's a revolving understanding as our lives
of
have gone by.
course. I'd say that as far as my relationship with gender, I guess we start at the beginning, right? It's a very good place to start. Um, so when I was really young, um, I definitely was like uh, flamboyant's not even the right word, but I was just kind of never particularly concerned with gender or gendered things. Certain members of my family were, but that sort of resolved itself as time went on, uh, in one way or another. Um, but I was just, yeah, I was never particularly concerned with gender growing up, and then as I kind of I came out initially as like gay, quote unquote, when I was 12, I think, which was very early. And I grew up in New York City, so it was never a huge concern for me. Um, I had a pretty accepting environment around me. Um, Especially at that point when I got to that point, any sort of negative, vibes had been pretty much dissipated by then, as far as like family or close friends were concerned. Um, and then I think I just kind of went along ignoring sort of dysphoria that started to crop up once puberty happened until like I was 17, I want to say, or 16, when I sort of found out that being non-binary was a thing. I was like, oh, like that seems like something that could be cool. And I'm definitely experiencing dysphoria and I'm uncomfortable right now. So maybe this is a thing I'll try. So I tried it out amongst close friends and it felt good. Um, I started out using he, they pronouns and then they, them. And then I went into college and started college identifying sort of as non-binary and testing that out. And art school, uh, not exactly the most conservative place in the world. Definitely a pretty open environment. Um,
That's true.
yeah, I mean, it was great. I was allowed to do whatever I want. I know I have issues with this, like sort of uh, pop culture item as well, or moment. But I went to Rocky Horror, which was like a super positive experience. I like tried out makeup for the first time. I was like, oh, this is cool. I'm sort of dipping my toes into things.
I
Um,
also went to Rocky Horror in college.
yeah, I mean, it was just like all the queers went and hung out and just like were able to sort of be themselves and vibe. And it was just like a really good place and moment for me. And then when I was 19, I met a close friend of mine who is trans. And this person kind of showed me that was an option, that like actually going through with medical transition was okay. Was there was rational human beings who did it. It wasn't just what pop culture would show of tragic sort of horror stories or actual like Silence of the Lambs types horror stories. They're real life, happy, well
Mhm.
adjusted, like, in fact, are you most, or if not all, just well adjusted people, just human beings. And I was like, oh, I like desperately want this for myself. And so I just kind of started hormones at 19 and moved forward. I had top and bottom surgery at 21 and 22.
Oh wow.
Um,
How
yeah,
long did you have to wait for those surgeries? Because I know my wife had to wait at least a year.
yeah, it was about a year and a half.
Mhm.
I sort of started setting it up when I was 19 or 20, and then had the surgery done at 21 and then 22. Um, and my relationship with gender is kind of mellowed. I definitely only use she, her pronouns and consider myself to most degrees a girl, but there is stuff about sort of non-binary identity that I still kind of identify with. I definitely sometimes feel just kind of like more of an absence of gender, and then sometimes it'll lean more towards feminine or being a girl, and it's just kind of comfortable in that range.
Mhm.
But I have found that given the fact that I do deal with dysphoria, and b, the fact that I do use she her pronouns exclusively, um, that it's just kind of easiest to outwardly present to a lot of cis people as a trans woman, which has been, I mean, I do identify with that label to a degree as well. I won't claim that I'm not a trans woman if anyone asks, because I think that label fits to a degree. But I don't know, there's more complexity and nuance that I think can be found when you're around other queer and trans people.
Mhm.
Uh, I've definitely found myself more able to relax and be less like concerned about cis people's perceptions of me. Um, and that's
So
that's kind of, I'm 23 now. That's kind of where I'm at.
so would you say that you are a non-binary trans feminine person?
Yeah, I think that's solid. But honestly, like, again, I'd go with a trans woman. I'd go with non-binary. I've become a lot less concerned with that particular kind of label as I've sort of toned, or not toned down, but sort of tapered off on any like major medical related you know actions that I want to take. I've been on hormones for 4.5 years.
Mhm.
I found myself enjoying labels less and less in the context of being around other queer people, and just
Sure.
kind of, as long as my pronouns are respected and it's she her all the way, then I'm like, and I don't want to be referred to like as a guy. If I would get referred to as like a girl, that's wonderful. um but I'm typically more tense about labels when I feel like I'm in a situation where I'm maybe less, not even less comfortable with the people that I'm around, but that I feel like they might know less or be less tuned into queer spaces.
Sure.
Um, yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. I love that story. I haven't heard that whole story before. I really appreciate you sharing that with us.
Yeah, of course.
I want to jump to a question that Hexagonal asked, and
Mhm.
Hexagonal was actually a guest here on the show about 3 episodes ago. So if anyone is interested
Oh,
in
that's
hearing that
wonderful.
whole interview, the VOD is
They're so
on YouTube.
wonderful.
That might be
Hell
the
yeah.
YouTube link. Yeah. So
Mhm.
one day this will also all be a podcast. I just need to get my act together and I haven't.
That
That's what
sounds,
happens
I
when you
also
change your
would love
name
to
on
start a queer
things.
podcast. Oh yeah. I mean, and that's a whole rebrand, right? I'd love to start a podcast too. I think most of the gays I know want to start a podcast.
Yeah. I mean, this essentially is, I already have one podcast
Yeah.
and it's all tabletop stuff. And so
So cool.
essentially this is the podcast recording. It's just I got to edit it. We'll get there
Oh
one
yeah.
day.
I mean, this is phenomenal. What you're doing is so cool. I love this.
It's super fun. If you run into any other like queer streamers that can talk about gender in an educated way and some other topic, and
Yeah,
the meshing and correspondences thereof, please send them my way.
of course, of course.
So Hexagonal asks, I know this is a sensitive question, so feel free not to answer. Do or did you know what you wanted your body to look like? How did you figure that out?
Um, hmm. Yeah,
And
that's a tough one.
you're totally allowed to answer or not that question. Any
Yeah.
question you can say. I don't feel comfortable discussing that, or I don't actually know
Yeah.
the answer.
Um, I guess I'd say, a lot of what triggered my like actual medical transition was gender dysphoria. And I definitely found that the dysphoria that I had um started to manifest around puberty. I definitely um it wasn't even like looking at, I know some people find looking at like certain media or people in the media helps them figure out how they want to look. But for me, it was just looking in the mirror and feeling like something was like incongruent or something was just like not comfortable. And just always wanting to cover up and sort of, I was very hesitant to start hormones. I was
Mm-hmm.
very nervous and I started at a very low dose. I was just very kind of cautious because I didn't know if it was something I wanted. I didn't know if I'd like what would happen.
Mm-hmm.
But the longer I was on it, the more comfortable I got and the more steps I took. And then I tried, just using she, her pronouns and presenting much more femininely in classes in school. And art school was a great testing ground for that.
Yeah.
To see if the pronouns made me happy and if the way people referred to me or saw me made me happy. And then so I came out at work. I was working in a restaurant at the time that is now closed. But um, I was I was a wild child through a lot of my youth. Um, and this was just I still look back at this and I'm like, what was I thinking? I'd been at work presenting just like totally, I mean, I wouldn't say masculine because I don't think I've ever really been masculine, but you know, presenting like a boy, whatever, like a cis dude. And one day I just kind of came in dressed how I wanted to be dressed and with makeup on, and I was like, okay, this is me. Hi. And I just went into work. Um and didn't say anything to anyone. Um and just did it. And it went surprisingly well. I mean, there were definitely, a restaurant is full of, I don't know if anyone here has ever worked in a restaurant, but there are definitely some characters and there's definitely a kind of like toxic masculinity in certain parts of it. And that was something that I definitely had to deal with. But um, yeah, I just kind of went in and the restaurant I was working at was in a very queer neighborhood. So generally it just kind of happened. And then after that, I like decided on surgery and I went back and forth over it for a while. And, it was just kind of taking it step by step and
Mm-hmm.
seeing what made me feel good and what made me feel comfortable. And once I kind of I think it was really I started hormones and I started noticing that I liked what was happening and that I moved forward a little bit more on that. And I think after that, it just kind of started snowballing and me realizing that I knew how I wanted my body to look and it was what was happening.
Yeah.
And I think that that's, good advice for anyone who is seriously considering medical transition is like, if you're able to get on hormones, start those at a low dose, see if you like what's happening. If you don't like what's happening, if you don't, you
Yeah.
can stop. And there's hardly any changes that happen from starting hormones just a little bit and noticing a couple changes and then, stopping generally, that doesn't cause any real lasting stuff. It's more being on it for extended periods of time.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that if you're trying to figure out how you want your body to look, just notice what makes you uncomfortable, which isn't hard. Uh, if you have dysphoria, it's not hard. And then just work from there and try and make little tweaks and don't don't go all the way in on it if you're very much unsure. just
Mm-hmm.
kind of be, and just more than anything, even if like you know that you want to do it, just be gentle to yourself. The stuff takes time. um Afford yourself the grace to sort of mature into everything. You know, you didn't go through, you know, the first puberty you went through, if you went through it in like a month, you can't
Yeah.
expect this to happen in a similar amount of time, regardless of if you even like just know this is what I want. um yeah, and then I'm still kind of deciding if FFS is something that's in my future, facial feminization surgery.
Really?
um
You
yeah,
haven't had that yet.
no, no,
Your face looks
I
very
haven't.
feminine to me. You didn't ask for my
Thank
opinion,
you.
but
No,
yeah.
but no, I appreciate that. It's something that I've definitely considered.
Mm-hmm.
um because I definitely do still experience dysphoria around that. And I think the real thing about that is money and finding the right person, and that's off in the future. But
Yeah, I hear that.
I was definitely lucky with starting hormones. Essentially, like I was 19, but I had just turned 19, and I was already a late bloomer, so I was kind of still in the tail end of the first puberty.
Sure.
So I was able to kind of, I think, avoid some like more changes that would have occurred later down the line.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, talking. One of the things that we've talked about is the importance of giving um, puberty blockers to trans
mhm,
youth, because even if the trans youth later decide that they're cis, like they just have the same puberty, it's just delayed by however long they were on
mhm,
the blockers, and it just like it halts the, in some cases, irreversible changes, like in the case of trans
yeah,
women, that your the size of your body, right, how tall you are, how broad your shoulders are, all of that.
yeah,
My wife calls it testosterone poisoning that can
yeah,
happen. um, and yeah, I think it's really cool that you got to start HRT at such a young age.
yeah. I mean, there are definitely still things that I'm uncomfortable with. Just to shout, like the size of my shoulders definitely makes me a little uncomfortable sometimes. The shape of my body occasionally will make me uncomfortable. Uh, Even though I feel like HRT has done a lot with fat redistribution and things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm definitely lucky. I'm relatively short. I'm 5'4", 5'5". So I that was definitely something that um and that's just family. That's just everyone in my family is short. Um but yeah, there definitely is a lot to be said for getting kids access to puberty blockers, which don't have any lasting effects. If you
Mm-hmm.
go off them, you just go through puberty. There's
Yep.
nothing. If that's a different discussion, but um, that's a different discussion. But getting people who want them access to puberty blockers just to try them out, you know, that's important. That's definitely important. And um, you know, I think as, you know, we get through this reintroduction really of trans people into Western canon, um, we'll start to see things like that slowly become more common. Um, Provided uh, we see some changes in political direction and fast, but that's also another discussion entirely.
It totally is. Um, one of the things that I think in general is helpful to trans people, and I'm using trans as a broad term. I'm using trans to include non-binary, gender fluid, demi boy, demi girl
Mhm.
type folks, all of
Yeah,
that. Um, One of the things that I think can really help is to have media that represents us. So I
mhm.
want to kind
Hard
of
agree.
pivot our focus a little bit on
Mhm.
the art stuff, because that's something, you know,
Yeah.
that not every trans person knows stuff about.
Mhm.
So can you tell us more about like gender and art?
I could definitely, as far as media goes, um, I definitely I mean, there's two sort of conversations to be had. There's representation in media, which is super important, and kind of more concerns, uh, like accessibility in like in the art world in terms of um like I suppose what would be called like low art, which is I just don't have any other term for it. Like comics or television or like films, blockbusters, that kind of thing. And then there's representation in terms of the field that I'm definitely a little bit more familiar with, which uh, involves like fine art, like art house movies and gallery work and art schools and professorships and museum shows. And um, those are two very different conversations, both of which I'd say more trans representation is necessary in both of those sort of circles. But I do think there is a distinct importance in terms of media that is accessible to the general public. That there need to be more positive trans representations. And when it comes to trans masculine people, more representations at all.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm trying to be the
I think about
representation I need to see in the world.
absolutely. But no, I mean, like growing up, right? I mean, I talked about this. My understanding of trans people was like Law and Order, Silence of the Lambs, Ace Ventura. Like it was just not good. And even like
Yeah,
Rocky Horror is like fun, important, but like ugh, a little sketch.
yeah.
Um,
We need trans
you know,
heroes, not just trans villains. We need trans joy, not just trans
yeah.
pain.
I mean, and in general, like the fact that Disney queer coded like most of their villains, like just there's like a lot that went into making queer
Yeah,
people and queer traits aligned with just kind of like, I mean, besides just deeply othering trans people, but also just like turning that into like a thing you did not want to be, like a warning sign and
yeah,
like or a
totally.
tale of caution. Yeah. I mean, I do think there's a lot of good stuff out there now. There definitely needs to be more, but I've noticed a lot more trans characters in popular media. Even in terms of like, I mean, Steven Universe comes to mind. I think a lot of queer people know about that, and I mean, like the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. Like, there's lots of fun, like popcorny type media that has trans representation now to a degree.
Hmm.
But there definitely needs to be more. I'm still having to hunt stuff out. It's not like I've ever just happened upon trans representation. I've usually sought it out.
Yeah. There's a new trans documentary that came out on a popular streaming platform in the last couple of months.
Mhm.
And I only got about 30 minutes in until I had to turn it off because it was like 20 minutes into the show before I saw any trans man or trans masculine, non binary type people. And it was a lot. There was also a lot of like pain and trauma. And I was like, oh
Mhm.
God, we have these like huge name recognizable trans people in this like documentary thing,
Mhm.
and it's just like, where's the joy? Maybe it's at the end. I haven't watched it to the end because my
Yeah,
little soul got so crushed by the first 30 minutes. I was like, I just can't. I need a break. Anyway.
that's a mood. No, I mean, I was thinking about like Pose recently, and that's been something that has had some definite joy to it and told stories that needed to be told. Um, but and yeah, I mean, there's definitely there are stories out there, but they're definitely hard to come by at times. And then just as far as fine art's concerned,
Hmm.
I think so much of that canon has been told by not only like cis people or straight people, but by just like cisgendered heterosexual white men. Um, and I found it interesting being trans in those spaces because in some sense I've definitely felt as though there's more solidarity amongst just like everyone that's not an older straight white man.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
because there's just everyone's trying to sort of push for progression that just hasn't really been there. Um, But I also do find like looking at art of trans people or by trans people that has become popular in the fine art world. A lot of it is not done by trans people. I mean, one piece in particular that sticks out is by Jenny Saville, who is a very talented painter. Her work is beautiful, and I think that she has done some wonderful things. And granted, this was either in the 90s or the early 2000s, but there was a painting of a trans body that she did that was definitely leaning towards being sexualized in an uncomfortable way. And the description was uh, not something we'd use today. And I think that a lot of that is a product of her time. I don't hold that against her at all. But I do think that the fact that there are just in the more prominent canon that isn't up and coming artists that are, you know, there's definitely a lot more LGBT artists coming forward currently and starting to make names for themselves. But the fact that the art canon, you know, up until like the 2000s, early 2000s, had just kind of non-existent trans representation. It was definitely, you know, troubling coming into that world and seeing like a couple of the only examples of trans representation in that world being A, not told by trans people, and B, just like, you know, not of the best fetishistic, just I mean straight up just kind of like fetishistic.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that there haven't been trans artists in the past and who haven't made marks on the canon, but they're definitely, you have to go digging. And I'm very grateful to see and very happy to see a lot more people telling trans stories in the worlds of fine art that I'm in. And I'm very happy to be one of those people. I feel I'm on good company. And I think over the past 10, 15 years, it's starting to become a more and more common thing. As is true of society as well. There's slowly becoming more prominence with trans folks. And I think that that's very important.
Mm-hmm. Mirami says in the chat, I don't know if this has been your experience, but moving in some of the fine art world sometimes, I found there's been some weird gatekeepy things folks say and do.
Um, hmm. Yeah, I I don't know if I found as many gatekeepy things. I will say I've noticed that sometimes. What's a good way of putting this? My boyfriend talks about this with me sometimes. Uh, that there often is an expectation of marginalized people to kind of perform for the majority, be they white people, cis people, to kind of perform pain
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
to sort of assuage some societal cultural guilt. Um, and I think that that is a difficult line to walk because as a trans person and as a trans person who wants to make art about queer experience, you know, for the most part, I mean, I have other interests and investigations that occur in my practice, but um, you know, you want to be able to make work that involves your identity if that's of interest to you. But you don't want to be pigeonholed into that, and B, you don't want to have to kind of tell these stories and narratives and make this work that is like essentially trauma porn to kind of again like assuage some kind of guilt. And I've noticed that a lot of times that's kind of what is expected of you if you are a marginalized artist.
Mm-hmm.
And that I think is adjacent to gatekeepy stuff, but
Yeah.
I haven't noticed any like directly like you're not XYZ enough to make art about XYZ. I can't say I personally have noticed that.
So Rumpelstiltskin, who I've heard that you two have been grooving on each other's streams lately.
Yeah.
Rem is a trans man art
Uh-huh.
traditional art streamer.
Uh-huh.
Rem asks, "How do I make queer and trans art without performing pain?" Is a question I struggle with all the time.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of what I have come to find, at least in my own work, is that it's very, very important to it's very important. A couple of things. For me personally, it's important that I don't just make art that's like, I am trans. This is art that is me being trans. This is just I am trans, and that is the art. Um, which can absolutely be extremely therapeutic, but I think is a little bit one note and can potentially lead to falling into sort of accidentally performing like a just putting yourself out there in a way that is a little bit um, unnecessary and kind of gauche. Um, and then beyond that, I think that I found I found it important to do more investigations outside of just myself into the queer community, into queer history, into current events, into um, concepts. I've been reading a lot of philosophy lately, and kind of uh, making work that ties into other fields has been a really nice way for me to kind of make sort of concentrated pieces or suites of work that I feel like are less intrinsically tied towards my personal history and baggage.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah.
Am I distracting you by writing questions down?
Oh no, 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 not at all, not at all, not at all.
Um,
No, I noticed Capybara was asking about voice.
yes.
Um,
So Trans Capybara's question is, I love your voice and I've been working on my own. I'd love to hear how you went about training your voice to sound how you do today, only if the topic lends itself to the question.
oh yeah, for sure. I definitely huh. I'm uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable with my own voice more often than not. I it's something I definitely still experience dysphoria around. But I will say I just kind of spent a lot of time practicing talking how I wanted to to talk, to speak how I wanted to speak. Um, and I suppose, I mean, this is not necessarily a super productive answer, but I spent a lot of time serving tables during college and hosting restaurants. Um, and I mean, a lot of that just involves speaking over and over again in a very specific customer service voice, just kind of like, hi, welcome to so and so. Can I get your order? Would you like sparkling or still? Can we get you started with some bread? Just like the general,
Mm-hmm.
you listed off, and doing that so often
Yeah.
provided opportunity to practice. And I would say if there are any areas of your life where you are just kind of going through and interacting with either strangers or you're just talking or live streaming, very
Mm-hmm.
good for that. Um,
Yeah.
just so you can just go through over and over again and make little tweaks, and occasionally it might sound weird to viewers or it might sound strange, but you know, generally you're not going to interact with a lot of these people again, or even if you do, like it's people who aren't really going to notice or be like, huh, what was that,
Mm-hmm.
um the kind of anonymity of that lent itself well to practicing. Um, And I guess I like watched a couple voice training videos, but for the most part, I just kind of tried to pitch my voice up and then change like the resonance and how I spoke. And I actually, this is a weird, silly little thing, but you know the like answering machine voice? Um I just listened to that and I tried to copy it because that's like such a soothing tone that I like wanted to replicate, just to like
Mm-hmm.
at the tone, please record your voice message. When you finish recording, you may hang up or press 1 for more options. That vibe. Like I was just I honestly I just like practiced that a lot. I noticed like I did that one time as like a joke for a friend and they were like, "Oh my gosh, your voice sounded like just like hers." And I was like, "You mean it sounded feminine?" So I just my little gremlin brain was like, "All right, let me just do that." Um but
Everyone
yeah.
in chat is swooning over your voicemail voice.
Oh God.
Not in a creepy way, just in an impressed way.
No, no. I appreciate that. But yeah, I mean, finding things that have voice tones that you like and trying to practice them, or you know, finding places where you can try your voice out over and over again in different contexts, I think could be uh, a really nice way to go about it. And as far as like actual voice training tips, I didn't necessarily like take lessons or anything, so I don't have a lot of those, unfortunately. Um, it was just kind of like a constant thing over years of just training my voice. And it's something I still do because again, I still have some dysphoria around how I sound.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Speaking of dysphoria, I wonder if you have done self portraits ever. I mean, I think I know at least there's an answer of at least one time you have because that's your logo on the screen up over there.
Yeah.
But how, like, did you ever do self portraits like at different points in your evolution as a trans person? And how was that? Did you totally avoid it really hard at a certain point because of reasons? Like,
Um,
can you
I
tell us
definitely,
about that?
yeah, yeah. I so I've been doing art since I was very young. I took the in I grew up in New York City, and there was the Art Students League of New York in Manhattan had some like really affordable classes. We, you know, I my family was not very well off for quite a while, and um, when we started to get a little bit more comfortable, um, my mom found this great deal for art classes at the Art Students League where you could just go and sit and draw models. And that was something I kind of did for a while, and that got me into art. And then beyond that, I would draw models and practice that, and then I would practice self portraits at home when I was younger. Like I started doing that at like probably 12, and just onward. I did all of that kind of thing. Um, I did pre college at Cooper Union, which is an art school in New York.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and did a lot of self portraits there while I was kind of out as queer and playing with the idea of non-binary identity. Um, in the beginning of college, I did a ton of them as I was, you know, doing still experimenting a little bit. But once I actually decided to transition, I kind of did a lot less self portraits of where I was at.
Mm,
Um, and I think that had a lot to do with dysphoria and just like not being comfortable looking straight at myself
sure.
for a long period of time. What I will say is that this painting behind me is of me, just as a younger person. And that was something that I found oddly therapeutic at the time, was to do art of myself before I had started transitioning, because I knew
Mm-hmm.
I didn't look like that anymore, just by virtue of like, you know, even if if I didn't think at the time that I passed, or that which again, I mean, no one should feel like they need to, passing is another thing but entirely, but you know, it was a way to distance myself, I think, from it was a way to distance myself from my past and to reflect upon it and to kind of create some space there. and made me feel like I had been progressing more. And those self-portraits were nice. And then since then, a lot of the art that I've done that's been representational has been focused on, that's been, I suppose, figurative, has been of people around me that are close to me, and less focused directly on myself. I've also done some studies of historical work, and as well as just using figure references that I either paid for or found for free online, to create work that, you know, was a little bit more focused on a figure as opposed to an identity, like a person behind it. And then a lot of it also just leaned into abstraction after a while. So I became less of concerned with directly representing myself.
Mirami asked, do you have anywhere we could view your work?
I knew this was going to come up, and I should have a solution for this, but I don't. So
The
I
short
do have a
answer,
website.
go follow your Twitch channel, and
The short
more to
answer
be
is go
revealed.
follow me on Twitch, and I will be making work on there. So I mean, my Twitter, I post stuff there sometimes. The thing is, I do try to keep distance between my outward facing identity on Twitch and my professional practice as an artist.
Yep. You are not the only artist who I know is walking that line.
Yeah, it's just, especially in fine art, I working so much in the Twitch realm, and in what is essentially like commercial art and illustration and all of that kind of thing. I definitely want to maintain distance, especially because I'm doing interviews soon for things. I just don't, I would rather these worlds not cross if they don't have to right now. However, I do very frequently show the work that I do on stream. And in fact, if you stick around until this ends on my stream, I'll probably do, because I'm assuming we'll have some new friends over. I'll be showing some work there, and that way you could see some of the stuff that I do, and I could share it without doxing myself. So that's a quick solution.
Yeah, it's very important not to dox yourself as a trans person on the internet with the word trans around your name anywhere. So I have deep understanding and respect for that. I also work on that. Yeah. Okay. Are there any trans, and again, that's the expansive definition of trans, artists that you think would be cool to look up or check out?
Oh, for sure. Hang on. I have a horrible memory, so I do keep a lot of lists.
Hooray, lists. And as a side note for the folks watching the stream, when this is while Gum is looking this up, my notes from this chat are going to be in the video description of the stream. So you will be able to see this list written out if Gum can send it to me digitally somehow, if you're comfortable sharing that, so that you can,
of course,
go check people out and do all of that. Yeah. Video game architect agrees. It's such a tough line to walk. I've considered doing a professional art service on Twitch for a while. It's a thing.
I mean,
it's totally
part of the reason I just don't do commissions on anywhere, because I just would rather not have a professional identity attached to Twitch in terms of like actually making commissioned artwork, when I'm going to be selling gallery work that invariably will have a different way of pricing and a different market, and to have other work attached to my name that will, you know, probably sell for much less, and just service different markets is just not a smart move for me as a you know, as a professional in the industry.
Yeah. I appreciate the nuance you have in mind considering all these things.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's a tough line to walk. You know, I'm going through this list. I'm not seeing a lot of explicitly trans artists. I'm seeing some queer artists, but I can definitely go over to Instagram and pull up some people as well. But I'd say Wickerham and Lomax are a queer couple duo that I love dearly. I've attended some of their lectures. I've gotten some drinks with them before. They're super, super lovely people, super talented. And they're Wickerham and Lomax, but Wickerham and Lomax, wonderful, wonderful people, wonderful art. Would definitely recommend checking them out. Let's go over to Instagram and see who else I can pull off the top. Cassidy Yearly is someone who is trans and a recent grad of SAIC, School of the Art Institute of Chicago, that makes wonderful work. They're phenomenal. I'll have to go through. I can put a list together and post it after this ends if that's helpful.
Cool. Yeah. That would be
I'm
awesome.
sorry. I wish I had more, but I really didn't have I thought I had more on that list, and really there were less than I expected.
That's okay. It's part of why we're doing this is to educate people about this deficit, right? And to talk about it.
Absolutely.
So I want to take this moment to plug two things. I'm not getting paid to plug these things, but I think they're important resources for folks to know about. The first is a website called peer-to-peer.live. It was created by Trans Lifeline. I could be wrong, but it's created by a trans nonprofit, and the whole point of it is to improve the visibility and searchability, discoverability, that's the word I was looking for, of people with different identities. So I found, when I was looking to raid at 1:00 today, I found 10 non-binary neurodivergent streamers who had closed captions who were live right then, because they're all in that directory. And there's all the other ones that are not live are also listed in there. And so if you are a streamer and you want to apply, I think the wait period for that right now is about a week, because they have had a lot of people apply, and they're still they vet all of the people who apply. So it's not just a big dumpster fire of people who don't belong. But it's great because it's not only about gender, it also is about sexuality, disability, neurodiversity, religious related identities. For example, if you're Muslim, I don't think there is a Muslim tag on Twitch. And so all of these tags we wish existed on Twitch. An outside entity has just created a resource that the community has been needing and asking for years. And so that's one way. So if a person were to pop in there and look under trans and look for anyone streaming in the traditional art category, what are some other maybe categories you might look for queer artists or trans artists?
Yeah, I mean, LGBT is absolutely one. Digital art, traditional art. There aren't a lot of LGBT tags, is the unfortunate thing.
Right. Yeah, I was thinking more the art tags.
Yeah, I mean, digital art, traditional art, painting. I believe there's one for inking as well, or like comics. There's one for animation, I know that. As far as art goes, I think there are ones specific to mediums like watercolor and oil and things like that. But the ones I mainly go for are like digital art or traditional art, painting, because that kind of encompasses what I do a little bit with more of a broader stroke. Yeah.
Pun intended.
Printmaking, ceramics, yeah.
I'm still laughing at the pun.
Oh no.
I'm very puns are my jam. What can I say? Okay, the other resource that I want to mention besides my own like Discord and community is there is a Discord called the Trans Community Center. And there's over 4,000 members in there. There's a very intentional vetting process. So once more, it's not just everybody who can get in. You have to be trans and you have to answer questions and you have to be educated enough about trans to be able to answer certain questions,
Mm.
and that is for the safety of the community. There is a section in that server, in addition to being able to talk with people about identities or about the coming out process and the different ways that a person can come out, where there's actually content creators that are highlighted in there, and those content creators get access to a pingable role. So like today when we were going live, I was able to ping the socialite role and let 200 people who were active on Discord right then, who are somehow trans identified, know that this talk show is happening. And
Yeah.
so, I feel really blessed and lucky, that I'm one of the 4 content creators in there. As far as I know, I'm the only trans masculine one, so that's
Mhm.
cool. But that's another sort of way to find each other, is in that community center, talking to each other. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, I love it. Are there any other resources that you would recommend for non-binary or trans individuals or allies?
Aw. Um, honestly, like outside of the, getting to trans focused like clinics and things, as far as like getting into hormones, as far as social media is concerned, I don't know about a whole lot. I do, there is one server that I do know on Discord that is, oh God, what is it called? I have it down here. It's called Queer Women Game. Um, and it is essentially queer and women, trans women obviously included, and I believe non-binary people included as well, but I'm unsure. I'd have to check that. That is centered around primarily queer women who play video games on the internet. Um, is there anything else I would plug specifically? Um, like a lot of the queer networking that I've done has been in individual people's discords,
Mm-hmm.
meeting a lot of queer people. I'm friends with I don't know if you all know Willow on Twitch. She's wonderful. I met her a couple months back, and we've become pretty decent friends, and she's super lovely.
Is the
Um,
username just Willow, or is it Willow
it's just
something?
Willow. Yeah, it's just Willow.
Okay.
Um, and she's her Discord is lovely. Um, and there are like quite a few just like, you know, LGBT focused streamers whose discords I just kind of vibe in sometimes. And that's been the way that I've been networking, at least as far as Twitch goes. A lot of I got on peer to peer recently.
Awesome.
Um, and but yeah, a lot of these resources are I have also, explored similar to the ones that you've mentioned. So
Awesome.
I don't have a lot.
No, it's totally fine. I just wanted to make sure there was space for that question if you had things you wanted to share
Yeah, of
about.
course.
Um, okay, I have at least 3 questions left.
Yeah.
Let's see. This next one says, "What would you like to make sure folks know about your perspective on gender and non-binary slash trans issues? Like, is there any other thing you want to make sure you get to say to our audience today
Um,
on sort of that broad topic that I haven't thought of to ask you?"
yeah, I mean, I think that there are a couple things. I think just with reference to my personal practice lately, I've been really interested in exploring truth as it pertains to queer identity, which I know sounds very grand and very uh, pretentious, but I think that what's been really interesting in exploring that kind of concept is uh, that I feel like as trans people, very often we're asked to define ourselves aggressively, strictly, and be confident in who we are at all times. And in exploring sort of my professional practice, I've had a really nice time trying to kind of come to terms with uh, coexisting truths or coexisting phenomena that may contradict, but also, exist in their full authentic forms. Um, you know, looking at, primary source documents and fables or myths, thinking about, and this is a very like surface level accessible like version of this, but thinking about how, for example, like, we have recorded a history of Stonewall. But we also have a kind of mythos we've created around that day, and how both of those things are allowed to be true. They're allowed to exist. And they contradict each other, and that's okay. And they can both be true, looking at how there is a lot of science out there that is full of bias present purely by virtue of the time, of the culture, that may skew certain things in one way or another, and sort of that there are people behind that kind of thing, and that affects trans people, and then also thinking about how a lot of myths and legends that are created within communities have a lot of truth and honesty to them, and are also just in their whole selves true, just a different kind of true, and understanding kind of where those lines blur between each other, I think is really intrinsic to my trans identity, and understanding how things are allowed to blur and coexist within each other, and maybe contradict, maybe rub up against each other, how that kind of conflict and struggle and search for truth, knowing that you're never going to find something that is wholly and intrinsically true, is joyful. That there's something really like almost sublime about trying to catch this like ephemeral thing, and knowing that you're going to keep trying and keep struggling with it, and knowing that you're never going to catch it, and being okay and at peace with the fact that you're never going to have a concrete answer for something. I've been really enjoying how that sort of sits within and describes my experience as a trans person, and kind of being very just, yeah. I think that's a solid summation.
I love that. I think part of why I switched religions partway through seminary
Mm-hmm.
is because I wanted a religion that was more flexible with truth,
Mm-hmm.
that was more about learning from your own perspective. Like you are your own connection to the sacred and the divine, and there is no intermediary
Mm-hmm.
who's explaining meaning making devices to you,
Mm-hmm.
right? No one is explaining God, higher power, goddess, the universe,
Mm-hmm.
etc. to one. And so I love that you, yeah, exploring truth as it pertains to queer identity. So cool.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
I mean, yeah. I think everyone has conflict inside of them, and things that are constantly struggling with, and we're always going to be struggling with that. That is what it is to be human, is to kind of to have those internal turmoils, and to be constantly changing, to not be static objects. Um, and I think that trans identity is just another sort of facet of that, where it exists. You know, learning to become more comfortable with lines being blurred inside of myself, and for there to be contradiction inside who we are is, I think, and trying to find answers, but knowing you're never going to find the answer is really lovely. I mean, I think a lot about how, I think a lot about how trans people are kind of asked to provide a litany of, and in fact, I have a folder in my computer dedicated to, it's called Cis People Shut Up. No offense to anyone cis in the chat. Absolutely not. It's just, it's like
It's a
getting,
hilarious folder name. I love it.
it's a lot of scientific articles, academic papers, screenshots of Twitter threads, just a lot of documentation that I can just send to people when they start to just present like a ninth grade version of biology to me, and I'm like, okay, no, stop here, this now, quiet, leave me alone. And, like a lot of it that I was looking into, it has to do with like biological definition of sex, and thinking about how that actual binary is super unhealthy for cis people, and how their sort of health with regards to that area is treated. And how, in reality, everyone has something individual to themselves about how that situation is treated, and that we use binaries as like a way of oversimplifying, really simplifying to the extent of oversimplifying, and uh, being really reductive with how we treat people in health. Uh, and part of the reason that we haven't, advanced to using more fluid or just more categories for certain things is, it can be attributed to just society, and that just not being the way things are done.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just think thinking about a lot of things like that has been interesting and enlightening, and in looking at narratives, who's controlling the narratives, who's saying the things, why are they saying the things that they're saying, um, and has had an influence on me looking at like stories and storytelling.
Love that.
But yeah,
I want that folder.
I mean, I can share it. It's pretty hefty at this point, but I can share it.
Maybe I can. I know that you don't use the the setup that I imagine I could use to distribute the information, but with your consent, and we can talk offline about it, maybe I can find a way to share a link to a folder with all the things in it.
Of course, absolutely,
I love that.
absolutely.
Cis People Shut Up folder. I wrote it down in my notes. It's such a great name. So, next question is, can you share a moment of gender euphoria?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's definitely a couple. Um, I think having had bottom surgery, and looking in the mirror for the first time was a moment of gender euphoria. Without getting, that's probably the most I want to get into that, but
That's fair.
I think there have been moments of gender euphoria tied to relationships that I've had.
Hmm.
Um, and this is a kind of complicated one because, um, and one that I have a complicated relationship with. My boyfriend is a cisgender heterosexual man. Um, and he's wonderful. And I definitely for a long time struggled with the fact that I wasn't sure if his identity validated me in some way. Um, and dealing with that was interesting,
Mm-hmm.
uh, because I definitely felt some kind of like, euphoria isn't the word, but validation from, uh, you know, like someone who, uh, fits a more normative, identity, being interested in me, which is a complicated thing to wrestle with internally. Um, but on the flip side of that, I think developing our relationship and feeling comfortable enough with another person, regardless of who they are, to share really intimate details about myself, feel understood, seen, and safe with another person was very euphoric. And that had nothing to do with who, not with who he was. It had everything to do with who he was, but nothing to do with his, identity. And that was definitely euphoric. Um, I think a lot of my experiences with euphoria have been around safety, around feeling safe, around feeling comfortable. Um, because that's a feeling that I definitely have not had the fortune of experiencing all the time.
Hmm.
And I think that, thinking about safety and comfortability and just like feeling at home in something, be that a body, be that with a person, be that in a space, has been kind of the core of some really euphoric moments.
I like that.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, yeah.
there are trans people of all sorts of ages and states of being in the chat always, but our topic next week is actually we're going to have someone who like just came out as maybe some flavor of trans, maybe question marks go
Mhm.
here. Someone who's like definitely identifies as trans and has been out for a couple of months, and my wife, Trans Capybara, who's I would say an elder trans. I think she's been on HRT 5 or 6 years and has had some
Mhm.
surgeries and stuff. And we're just
Mhm.
going to talk about all of that whole like life stages of trans and what that's all like. And so my my final question that I have is there any other advice that you have for newly trans folks, like folks that are just their little egg is just hatching, they're just starting to figure this stuff out? What would you want someone who's at the beginning of all of this journey to know as
Mhm.
someone who's had some experience?
Yeah, absolutely. And while I'm answering this chat, feel free if you have any other invasive questions for me, any little things you want to ask. I'm right here. Feel free. But no, no, no. Advice, advice. I I think my best advice for people who are new to coming out. Um, I've said this earlier in our talk, but be gracious with yourself. Allow yourself the grace to mature into everything gently. Um, there's no need to rush. When it comes to hormones, there's definitely, if you're of a certain age, certain, incentives there. But when it comes to actually pursuing like social transition, there is no rush to get everything done all at once. Experiment, go at your own pace, and um, be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. It's very easy to be very, very hard on yourself during transition, whether that be because the world refers to you or sees you a certain way, because when you look in the mirror, you struggle with what you see, or people are invalidating or gatekeeping your identity because you don't have certain facets of trans identity that they feel are necessary to qualify. Um, be kind to yourself, allow yourself the space to breathe and to take a step back from everything. It can be very intense. It can feel like you're doing everything all at once. Um, and that can be very scary. Perspective is key. Take a step back, take a deep breath, and remember that you're going to be okay. And that while everything may be happening very, very quickly, you know, it's one day at a time. It's 1 year of your life. It's, you know, things will happen very quickly and then they'll start to happen slower. And there's no need to rush. Be kind.
I love that. Earlier you were talking about what it felt like starting HRT and sort of the trepidation you had before, and I completely related to all of that. Like, I
Mhm.
mean, there's a video I made 2 months ago tomorrow of me applying testosterone for the first time, and I'm like, I remember the entire like 48 hours leading up to that moment, I was completely freaked out. I was so scared, even though I'd been thinking about starting T, and I've been non-binary and out for like 4 or 5 years, and so I'd already been some flavor of trans, and so there really did feel like something. There was like, oh, I had so many feelings. I totally cried so much, but you know the thing that I think you said that really I think is worth highlighting again is the piece about, when you start HRT, you don't just magically change overnight. It's not like, for in my case, it's not like I'm going to take testosterone one time and wake up and tomorrow I have an entire beard, right? Like it takes time. And if you're just starting out, you can see how it feels in your brain and see if you like the changes that you're starting to experience. And for me, what I really noticed is as I've been on tea, it only took about a week or two for me to call my doctor and say, I want to switch from a non-binary dose of tea to a like binary trans man dose of tea because my brain felt like it was working better on tea. And like
Oh yeah.
at the end
Yeah.
of my day, I notice around 10 p.m., my brain stops working and everything crashes and my energy goes way down. And I think honestly, it's because the hormones aren't in my body as much as they were at the start of my day when I put it on. And so I'm experiencing this sort of peaks and valleys with my
Mhm.
energy and my ability to brain because of it. So I've had to shift around like when in the day am I doing certain tasks because my body just like
Mhm.
needs the hormones to run on actually. And so not only is it running better, it I notice when it's gone. It's like when I sleep without my CPAP machine. I'm like, "Oh no. I definitely did not have that CPAP last night. It's the absence of the thing that is helping me is what
Mhm.
really highlights when something is working." Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, yeah, I think that I definitely noticed that too. I was very angry and upset as a teenager. I definitely dealt with a lot of like deep seated struggles with emotional stability.
Hmm.
And while a lot of that was attributed to outside factors, a lot of it was about being trans. A lot of it was also about past family stuff and whatnot. But starting hormones, I just kind of felt more at peace and mellow and just like okay. I felt more stable after starting hormones, and that was a really good indicator for me that that was something I wanted to move forward with.
So I see a question from the right Casey in chat, and I want to modify the question a bit and ask an aspect of it we haven't discussed, which is,
Mhm.
do you have any like as a streamer, do you have any voice dysphoria with your VODs, your replays of your streams, and if so, what do you do to cope with that?
Yeah, I definitely do. I definitely feel uncomfortable with my voice on stream. Listening back to VODs and clips makes me uncomfortable. I do it because it's important and to like do the work that we're doing. You know, the clips are important, the VODs are important. I will just now and then delete a VOD if I was particularly uncomfortable with how I was looking or sounding that day.
Hmm.
And I reserve that to be well within my rights if I want to just get rid of a VOD to do it. But there was one like a week or two ago that I was just like, I don't like this. I don't feel comfortable with anything about this. And I just got rid of it. Um, but um, I think, you know, it hasn't gotten easier. The listening to your voice and everything. However, uh I have learned to tune it out more and to tune out kind of like my discomfort with everything and just kind of put it on the back burner because um I know that that's a lot of internalized stuff and uh I'm at a point where I'm pretty aware that I sound or can approximate a voice that makes me feel comfortable when I'm speaking, and that gets me treated and referred to the way that I want to be treated and referred to. Um, so I know a lot of the dysphoria stuff is in my head. Obviously, all of it is, but um, I know from other cues that I'm at a place that I'm comfortable with. So I just kind of try to tune that stuff out as best I can. Um, yeah.
Hmm. We have a fluffy question, but I wanted to respond a little bit to what you said first and share that from a purely like platonic aesthetic appreciation place, The first time my wife and I, well, the first time Trans Capybara, my wife, ever saw you on stream, I was like, Gum's a trans woman. And she was like, no. And I was like, yeah, totally. She totally is. She was like, what the fuck? No way. I was like, yeah. She's like, wow. So we like sat there and talked about how your aesthetic is totally like transition goals. Like there are just, I mean, you maybe already know this, but there are trans people in the world who look to you and say, "Oh my goodness, that's possible. I also can look this glamorous and wonderful, and that's really cool." And I know that for me, like the dysphoria monster in my head, sometimes I can hear that and it just doesn't sink in at all. But you know, this will be recorded if you want to listen to it again later. But just so you know, like there are totally people in the community who look to you and say, "Wow, transition goals right there. Oh my goodness, so cool."
No, and that is wonderful to hear. Um, and it's wonderful to hear that people kind of that could make someone more comfortable with themselves and with their own transition. Uh, I think it's important to stress the fact that everyone's journey is different, and that um, the idea of passing itself is a really toxic one. And I get how tough it is to distance yourself from that, because it's something I
Yeah.
struggle with and worry about. I'd be absolutely lying if I said that I didn't worry about passing or not passing as a trans woman. Um, it's just something that I stress about. But it's also, not healthy. It's um the societal expectation for trans people to just fade into the background and appear as though they are not
Yeah.
is
Just a
is
passive cis,
is
even though a
yeah.
person isn't.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, that's violence against the community. You know, it's important to make sure the goals that you have and that are set are for reducing your own dysphoria and feeling euphoria with yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and as best you can divorce that from societal expectation, which I know is not always possible or easy.
Yeah.
But you owe that to yourself to try, because it can be really unhealthy.
Mm-hmm. You know, for me as a non-binary identified person, I that's something I wrestle with all the time. The passing or the not passing. And,
Mhm.
you know, I think what you say about you need to be doing whatever the trans thing is that you're doing or the non-binary thing you're doing is for you and not for society. And so,
Mhm.
you know, for me it has felt really important to stake claim to the non-binary identity and sort of like hold space for that specifically.
Mhm.
That's why the overlay is the non-binary flag and not the trans flag.
Mhm.
You know, non-binary is a flavor of trans, but I think
Mhm.
you know, more examples of people holding that I will not, like, neither the men's nor the women's bathroom is for me space. It feels really
Mhm.
important to me. You know, it's there personally, I feel like there is a lot of mostly cis pressure for
Mhm.
trans people to be on the binary because it makes it easier for them. Like I mean I've talked about this in other streams, but it's it feels like the only way we're going to get to the point where this third non-binary option exists, or better yet,
Mhm.
we move on into a gender abolition space where gender isn't a thing, right? Maybe we have gender expression, but like it's, you know, it's
Mhm.
not a, because the binary so much pushes people into systems of oppression that are based on the patriarchy and all of that. And if you want to hear more about that, we had a whole probably multi-hour conversation about that with Josen Star. It's the third episode of this show. But yeah, it's, I don't know. It feels important to me to hold space in the non-binary identity. Like even if there comes a point where I pass as a trans man or as a man,
Mhm.
there's something about it that just really feels important to me to stay in this space, especially for the people coming behind me who need the non-binary identity to exist and to have non-binary elders too.
Mhm.
So
Absolutely. That's wonderful.
Yeah. We have another question from Hexagonal.
Mhm.
Again, feel free not to answer. It's a tough personal question. Do you deal with thoughts of holding yourself to an unrealistic body standard? How do you deal with these thoughts, especially as technology evolves?
It's a difficult one. And I'm not going to pretend I'm even particularly good at it. I definitely hold myself to unrealistic body standards. I've struggled with body image for most of my life. Um, I think that having a good support system is always key. I think just again to stress the importance of perspective and the ways that you can find perspective, be that from people around you to just give you positive affirmations, or a therapist, or any number of ways to just not stay in your own head. I think as someone who's dealt with a lot of different mental illness struggles for the majority of her life, I find that if I'm not careful, I can just stay inside all day, stay inside my own head, and just kind of spiral. Um, and that getting outside, even going for a walk, um, being around friends and family, getting a hot meal, like just self-care things, taking a shower, like just there are things and that are very difficult to do. And I know the like, oh, you won't be depressed if you just drink water, obviously, or do yoga. That's not a thing. But taking care of yourself as far as self-care goes, just being around other people, even if you're able to do that, can give you a little bit of distance and perspective to have the focus be less just on you and only you, and you're the only thing you're paying attention to. I think that's probably my best advice for that, because I mean, I definitely do struggle with body image issues all the time. But yeah.
I think that dysphoria can be like such a heavy weight on a person's shoulders.
Mhm.
And one thing that we say in one of the communities that I'm in is, one way to improve your self-esteem is to do esteemable things. And so, once, at least for me, once I've done everything that day I can do for my transition goals, whatever they are, right? Like I put my minoxidil on my face so I get my little beard growth going on, and I take my HRT, work out if I
Mhm.
have the spoons and resourcedness to do that.
Mhm.
Just doing esteemable things, being of service to other people, being in community. Like, I don't have to
Absolutely.
be focused on and thinking about my body all the time, but that also doesn't mean I have to numb out and check out and be completely unavailable to my own
For
lived
sure.
experience the rest of the
Mhm.
time.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I.
Absolutely. That's a wonderful addition.
Yeah. All right, I'm trying to see if there's more questions. Here's a fluffy
Petra
one. What
asked
are some
about
of your
books.
favorite books?
Yeah.
Even just one or two.
Oh God, I want to like pull them out, but I'm not gonna get up and do that. Uh, I'm reading Native Son by Richard Wright, which is wonderful. Currently very intense, but wonderful, very needed. Kafka on the Shore, Kafka on the Shore by Murakami is a wonderful narrative with trans representation, decent trans representation, not stellar, but definitely decent. And Murakami is a gorgeous writer. So I would definitely recommend that. As far as books go, oh gosh, there's so many. There's so many. Between the World and Me by Taneshi Coates, um, Tale for the Time Being by Ruth Ozeki, uh, Under the Glacier by Haldor Laxness. A lot of these are fiction, which is a lot of what I read. I figure it's best not to go listing academic resources and articles. Although I don't read a lot of strictly like nonfiction books. So I do read a lot of poetry. If you're interested in poetry, Translating Moam by Kathy Park Hong, wonderful book. Book of Frank, actually, if we're talking about trans artists, C.A. Conrad is a non-binary poet. And the Book of Frank is a raunchy definitely intense and uncensored, really wonderful, vile piece of literature. Oh God, what else is there? I love Kurt Vonnegut. Um, I reread Dante's Inferno recently, which honestly is a blast. What a wild ride! What an insane acid trip of a book. Uh, Note the Notes of a Native Son that James Baldwin did. That is adjacent to Native Son by Richard Wright. James Baldwin, wonderful. That's also lovely. I mean, The Souls of Black Folk by Du Bois, classic. Um, The Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. If you're interested in some fun fiction, the Bartimaeus trilogy by, who is that even by? Jonathan Stroud. I read when I was a lot younger and really, really enjoyed.
I
Really
read that a long
strange
time
fantasy
ago
world.
too.
Right?
Is that the one with all the numbers with the stuff at the bottom? There's a name for this.
Yeah. The footnotes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the footnotes were such an
They'd like
interesting
talk in
part of that
footnotes.
book.
Yeah.
You totally got to read the footnotes.
No, it's a lovely, it's a very fun trilogy.
It is.
Yeah, that's a solid list of media. I have another list open if it wasn't apparent of just media that I care about, and I'm just going through the book section right now.
Awesome. So we've had questions about Dungeons and Dragons come up a couple of times, and I would actually prefer to not talk about it because I don't want a platform for an organization that has not only racist writing, but their editing practices even recently have been really oppressive to Black and
Oh,
Indigenous mixed race people of color.
really?
So
That's gross.
I've seen the D&D question happen 2 or 3 times, and I keep deleting it from my list of things because they're not great. But are there any other tabletop games that are not D&D that you have any thoughts or opinions about? I have plenty if you don't, but I just thought I'd ask you first since you're the guest.
But I will say, not talking about D&D per se, but about tabletop shows, some of which do play D&D, unfortunately, but that I deeply enjoy. I think I've been listening to Not Another D&D podcast lately, which I think is wonderful. Dimension 20. A lot of the things Brett and Lee Mulligan does, I really enjoy. There are a lot of cool D&D projects out there, and tabletop projects out there that I think are wonderful. And I do like that Dimension 20 has strayed a little bit further away from, has been more open to playing other systems, other kind of gameplay. And then I'd love to hear some of your suggestions, though. I know this is kind of your thing, so I'd love to hear your suggestions.
Well, I have a book here. So the system we are using for our recent actual play is called Thirsty Sword Lesbians, which is written by a trans woman lawyer and co-authored by 5 people of color. And it's all about relationships. It's all about April Kit Walsh is the trans woman primary author. It's all about it's not so much about fighting. It's about relationships and moods and the way that the complexity of being in love. Like there's a whole dynamic around declaring your love for someone. You get like bonus points, but then there's like all the other stuff, and it's a very cool system. And that's what we've been doing for Rainbow Hyperdrive, which is our it's the second show with that cast. It's technically the third actual play that I've streamed. That particular game is on hiatus indefinitely because the GM needed some downtime and refocus time. So Thirsty Sword Lesbians is a great system for that. There's another system. I actually have the email about it in my phone right now.
Hmm.
That I helped to sort of crowdfund. Where's that thing?
Awesome.
It's called Wander Home. It's written by another, I believe, non-binary person.
Uh-huh.
There's a lot of non-binary pals in independent like tabletop
Uh-huh.
role-playing game stuff. Like hang out and you'll meet all kinds of people in the Discord and what have you. Actually, in
Uh-huh.
um, a couple weeks, when is that happening? Is it the 28th? No, 21st. I think it's the 21st. Nope, that's the
Uh-huh.
wrong month. Oh my god. Okay, in a week and a half, 2 Wednesdays from now, um, we're going to have someone run a GM-less one shot with a system that they wrote, and the person is, I think, a trans man from Australia.
Uh-huh.
Let me see if I can find the name of the system. But part of what we do here on Wednesdays is we try to highlight some of those games that are not Dungeons and Dragons that
Uh-huh.
are cool, that think about race and racism, that think about these other
Uh-huh.
pieces. It looks like the system is called Green Hollow, and it's by Amble Studios. And so Logan is going to be running, not running because it's a GMless game, but will be facilitating the explanation of the rules, and then we will all have an adventure, and who knows what will happen.
Heck
Um,
yeah.
so one other person I can recommend that is still getting their stuff together is Alex the DM 89. Alex is a non-binary person
Uh-huh.
who super loves sort of some of the more spookier stuff, like dark fantasy, I would say, is their
Heck
category.
yeah. Uh-huh.
And Alex has a whole like tabletop Twitter that's getting developed and all this other stuff. And I just don't, they're in the middle of moving right now, so I just don't know if they have it all together. But Alex the DM 89 on Twitter is another
Uh-huh.
person to go check out. Alex is also often in the Twitch chat here during the daytime streams from 11 to 2 Pacific.
Uh-huh.
So if you want to interact with Alex directly, that's an opportunity. Alex does a
Heck
lot of
yeah.
like Vampire the Masquerade and stuff with a lot of deep
Oh,
politics
that's
and
fun. Yeah.
like has just done incredible character creation stuff for that game. Is doing some podcasts with Nikki Beholder to No One. And also I've heard some really great Delta Green one shots and has a bunch of other stuff kind of
Uh-huh.
in the making. I would say in general with tabletop, if you can move away from any systems that give bonuses based on race, that's a really good place to start.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair.
Um, but I also think, one thing that I really liked about, to circle back to Thirsty Sword Lesbians, one thing I really liked about Thirsty Sword Lesbians, and I'm not paid to promote them at all, is um, there aren't races. Like there's not even species to pick from. It's like you can
Uh-huh.
literally make anything up out of your brain. And so one of the people in the game, Mirami, who's here in the chat, is a giant space amoeba. And
Heck
so then
yeah.
the GM, who's also a trans artist of color, Agnostic Trek, is one of their handles. There's another one that has to do with Barnaby, I think, on TikTok. That's Barnaby, maybe.
Oh, that's awesome.
So Agnostic Trek runs the show and does the art for the show, which is like that's a lot of responsibility for one person. But yeah, there's the giant space amoeba. I'm playing like a cat person. There's someone playing a human being. There's someone playing like a space alien with a mouth that does this and does like princess transformation, like Sailor Moon style
Uh-huh.
stuff. And it's just like it's
That's great.
totally make up your own stuff, but no one gets like racial bonuses or whatever. And so
Yeah.
I'm finding as my relationship to tabletop games evolves, I'm more interested in more expansive rules light type systems where we can just
Uh-huh.
be silly and do puns and be anything we can think up and not be locked into sort of this other stuff. But rules light systems usually only sells one thing. So
Uh-huh.
for the big corporate tabletop is the thing I make money on entities, like it doesn't make sense for them to do that because what are they
Yeah.
going to do next? Write another system?
Yeah.
Anyway,
I've noticed people playing like Cyberpunk, not
yeah,
2077, but like playing Cyberpunk even just
the
because like,
tabletop game.
yeah,
Yeah,
just trying to
Mirami
find other systems.
Mirami and mentions if you like crunchier systems, Fate and Cipher are both good setting agnostic games. We actually
It's good.
we stopped streaming our persistent campaign for like 2 or 3 months because we were doing
Mm-hmm.
research on all of this stuff. It was
Mm-hmm.
like D&D is racist. We're going to stop doing D&D because the people of color in the group have said, can we stop doing D&D? And so we were like, absolutely yes. We're going to full
Mm-hmm.
stop on that and reassessed, and it took time. Um,
Of
so
course.
we're in the process of potentially developing another show that uses the cipher system. We're
Awesome.
sort of playtesting it right now, but
Mm-hmm.
it's a very cool setting created by Mirami, which is rad. So we'll see
That
we'll
is
see how that
awesome.
goes. That's, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably 6 months or a year away from being a thing anyone can view, but um, yeah. Blah blah. Tabletop special interest. ADHD autism brain goes wee.
No, tabletop's amazing. I love it. I love listening to this. I mean, especially as someone who like I've played tabletop games, primarily D&D. Um, and I've definitely also noticed similar things, but I haven't been as immersed into the world to know about all of these cool systems. So I think what you're doing, talking about all this stuff, is wonderful. I think that it's providing other options where, I mean, clearly some of the stuff is stuff you had to hunt for because it just
Yeah.
wasn't visible. Um,
Yep.
and for as someone who, you know, was very much interested in a lot of this stuff, but didn't maybe have the time to do, like I was putting in work in so many other different spaces and contexts that, you know, this particular area was not as developed, you know. I think what you're doing is creating a resource that's wonderful. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. It's been interesting because honestly, I haven't had the courage to GM, which is a pun because GenderMeowster and also Game Master. I haven't had the
Yeah.
courage to run one of these systems on stream, and part of that is because it's so much to produce and recruit players and keep track of people and do all of these other pieces. I just haven't. I haven't tried to also, in addition, go learn a new or several new systems. The exception
Yeah.
is I really like one-page one-shots
Mhm.
because literally you can show up knowing nothing, look at the paper together, and be like, okay, let's do the thing.
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
as someone with ADHD, I find one-page one-shots to be incredibly accessible and therefore
Mhm.
important to keep around. So there are a number of creators doing one-page one-shots. I don't know if any of them are trans or non-binary, but if I find someone who is both non-binary slash trans and making
Mm,
a one-page one-shot once a month, I will definitely subscribe to them on Patreon and play all their stuff on my stream with their
absolutely.
consent and like have a good old time.
Mhm.
So just to reaffirm for anyone who's hanging out in chat, all of the notes with all these lists and things, to the best of my ability, will be in the description of the VOD on YouTube. So if you want to take a moment now to go sub on YouTube so you can see it later. YouTube, how do I spell words? Hopefully that link works. If not, the one in my socials link here should. The Linktree link definitely works. A lot of the individual timers and things aren't updated yet. Um, so yeah. Let's see. We had one more question. Also from Sleeps on
Sleep
Ictitian.
Sonic Titan.
Sleep Sonic Titan. There we go. 3 words.
Sleep's a mod in my chat. Love sleep.
Awesome. Another question is, how do you personally separate gender as an internal identity from an outside identity that people place on you? Because it seems like those things overlap.
Um, Let me read that through again.
Whoops.
How do you personally separate gender as an internal identity from an outside identity that people place on you? 'Cause it seems like those things overlap somewhat. They do. And I mean, I think a lot of the stuff I've been interested in lately is in the fact that there's a lot of blurring. There's a lot of just general like messiness in identity. There always will be. Things are never as clear cut as I am X, I am Y, I am Z, like reading through your little like thing, which is very helpful. It can be very, very helpful, but there's always going to be internally some mess. It just kind of comes with the territory, you know. It's never going to be as simple as you want it to be because of any number, honestly, because of colonialism, because of like there are any number of reasons why just localized identities are never going to be the end all and be all of how you define yourself. They're extraordinarily useful for any number of reasons, but they can never be, by virtue of even the limits of language, they can never be representative of the whole that is your identity, the unit. And I guess separating how I view myself internally from how the world views me. The short answer of that is kind of that I let the world, whatever, the general populace, view me as either a cis girl or a trans girl. Full stop. I don't really try when it comes to just like how I move through the world. When it comes through how I present online, I definitely identify with being trans. That is something I put very front and forward, trying to create spaces in that world. When it comes through how I move through the art world or in spaces that I am closer and comfortable in, I project myself as the trans person that I am. How I view myself internally, I try not to let being trans define myself internally. It's something that I very much care about talking about. It's something I'm very passionate about. It's something that affects me and many of the people that I love. Trans issues, trans liberation. However, it is not, nor will it ever be, the whole that is the whole of myself. And I wouldn't want it to be. And I think creating, internally a lack of labels has been really freeing, just specifically for how I look and see myself. And just kind of allowing me to just be myself without borders, without structure, has been really helpful in that regard. Yeah.
Love that. Love that answer. Yeah, my answer is very simple. Basically, I feel like my gender identity, which is inward facing, and my gender presentation are two separate things.
Mhm.
But yeah, I feel like I agree with Trans Capybara. You have said it very eloquently, and I don't feel like I need to add too much to it.
Yeah.
So I'm wanting to wrap up. I'm noticing we've been live
Mhm.
for about 2 hours.
Mhm.
And just, is there anything you want to plug? Where can we find you? How can we support you? You've mentioned both
Yeah.
Twitch and Twitter, but just in case anyone's rolled in since you were here last. And then after that, we're going to raid GumHaven. So please
Mhm.
hang out for the raid, and we'll go meet Gum and Gum's community. I know some of you are already here, but we'll go say hi. The cloud of
Yeah.
meowsters will pop over and do a little more networking with each other and see what are you doing an art stream today? Is that what you said you were
I'm
gonna maybe
probably
do?
gonna, well, when we all show up, I think I'm gonna go through some of my like work, because I know there's some people who are interested in seeing some of
Yeah.
the professional work that I do. So I'll be sharing some of that, probably for about half an hour. And then I think I'm gonna have some community stuff going on. Probably gonna play like Gartic Phone, which is a fun drawing telephone type game. Um, I may continue doing art after that. But I definitely want to hang out with my community and play some games with everyone. Play some games with everyone,
Love that.
and just kind of invite everyone in to kind of hang out. And as far as plugs, yeah, GumHaven on Twitch, GumsHaven on Twitter, and beyond that, not a whole lot. I'm I oh I I'm Gumrose on Tumblr. I've had a Tumblr for 10 years, and I'm never leaving that hell site. So if you want to follow me there, you are more than welcome to. And beyond that, is it okay if I take a quick restroom break before you raid? I'm gonna then go live. Is that okay?
Oh yeah, totally fine.
Okay, wonderful. I will be right back.
All right. With that, I will switch over to the just chatting screen and deafen in Discord. And that that stream is going to be with 3 people who are plural. which means, the medical phrase might be dissociative identity disorder, but not necessarily. Um, and I have some homework to do ahead of time to read and teach myself more about plurality and multiplicity before the talk, to make sure that I can ask questions in an informed way. But we're going to talk about gender and plurality. We'll have three different systems, so three different human people who have multitudes within them, and what it's like to navigate that in general, but also from the perspective of gender. And so that it's a topic I've been wanting to talk about for a long time on stream, and I'm looking forward to having it. Healthy multiplicity is totally a thing. Yes, I agree. And if I remember, all three systems are also in some way dating or in connection with each other. So we'll also get some of those relationship dynamics between plural, multiple peoples, which it's such a fascinating topic, and I wanted to make sure we had 3 hours for it. So the other thing is these people are, opening up about their lives in a very personal, intimate, part of themselves. And so part of what we're doing in gratitude for that is it's also a fundraiser for one of the three of them. Elle is a trans person who wants to have some gender confirmation surgery stuff. And so the initial goal was about $8,000 to possibly get like a breast implants, but we have already hit that goal. And so what actually makes more sense for Elle is to have facial feminization surgery, which is something that Gum very briefly mentioned. And so the FFS is about 13 grand, which is a lot. I mean, trans surgeries are always a lot, and especially in the United States, our healthcare system is not robust enough to take care of us when we need these very vital things. Like, can you imagine if you had to pay this much money for vaccinations for the thing that's happening? It's just wild to me. So this Elle is also someone who has pretty consistently and from the beginning contributed to this community, to the Discord server, spent countless hours training the administrative team in how to create and run a Discord server. So if you have enjoyed the Discord, if it has been a space that you have found healing, that you have found a way to learn more about your own identity, etc., this person who has contributed to all of this for fun and for free, right? No compensation, would really appreciate some support. If it's boosting the posts that we're going to be making about it, if it's showing up and contributing financially, if it's inviting your friends to the stream because it's an interesting topic. I would really love to have a robust showing of the community. It is going to be a little bit later than usual, so I know that's tricky for people on the East Coast. It'll be 7 to 10 Pacific p.m. on Wednesday and 2 days, which is May 12th. So please do come learn, come support. Would love to learn together more about these topics, and I think it's honestly brave of people to be willing to talk about these things. It's very there's a lot of stigma around this stuff, and it's also really important to talk about. So anyways, would love to have you all show up for that. The VODs will be available later. You can contribute to the GoFundMe anytime. Let me see if I have a command for that. I think I set that up a while ago. Yeah, so there's the GoFundMe link. Let's see what they're at monetarily. They are at 7,800 out of a currently stated 8,500 goal, but they have a couple stretch goals. So less than 1,000 away from the first goal, with stretch goals for things that would be also great. I really do appreciate it, and we'll see you soon.